Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Scott Show. This is Scott here, and today's conversation is going to be about a letter I received in an email talking about mental illness. Now, I've been going back and forth on how I wanted to achieve this goal of bringing this to you, as it is a great letter just talking about someone's history on mental illness. And so I'm going to read the letter. I do want to keep the person's name out of it. If they choose to share it with all their friends and say, it's me, I'm cool with that. But I will read the letter verbatim. I'll try not to screw it up. Fingers crossed. I am not the best reader, which is why I just ramble on here on the Scott Show, but I will read this. So I'm here to talk today about mental illness. Some examples of this are depression, PTSD, OCD, and bipolar disorder, anxiety attacks, schizophrenia, also eating disorders, and addictive behaviors. The letter goes on to tell you a little bit about myself. In the letter, the writer is 40 years old, Native American, and female. Who was diagnosed with PTSD, bipolar, and anxiety attacks. Anxiety attacks began back in the day when I was a teenager and began drinking and smoking weed to medicate myself to relieve the anxiety. Back then, the public and most psychologists were not educated to the extent that they are today. So nothing was done about it. I wasn't taken seriously. It was blamed on being a teenager. Eventually, I started using harder drugs and hanging out with the wrong crowd. This led to making poor choices with the men I went out with. I was raped and physically abused by men. That led me to do more drugs and use more alcohol. This caused me not to care about myself and not to care about my responsibilities. I eventually ended up in a homeless shelter where they helped me get into a boarding lodge. That's where I seen a psychiatrist and was diagnosed with PTSD and bipolar II disorder. I was in my early 20s at the time I was put on medication. Throughout the next almost 20 years, I wandered around and stayed with families and other boarding lodges. I went to treatment 3 separate times for my chemical dependency. I continued to use hard drugs and alcohol. I was 35 years old when I went to treatment and moved to Brainerd, Minnesota. I continued drinking alcohol for the next 5 years with little bits of sobriety until I met my boyfriend, who sobered me up and got me going to AA. Today I am sober and don't use drugs. I have my own place and will soon be attending college. I have been through living hell dealing with my mental illness, from getting my meds switched over more times than I can count. All the seizures I have had and still struggle with on a daily basis to this day, but one day at a time and a lot of prayers, I get through it. It really makes me angry when I see or hear of people trying to take advantage of mental illness for what mental illness really is. From people lying to get medication to use or sell because they're drug addicts or they have no ethics, morals, or values. What makes me really furious is when the media contributes to the slander of the term mental illness when they report stories about people who are killing people in the news. There's a very high probability that it's contributed to mental illness. For example, the shootings in Las Vegas, the shootings in New York a few weeks ago, and most recently the 27 people who were gunned down while attending church. This really makes me think there is no safe place anymore. If you can't feel safe going to church, where can you feel safe? And when the media tries to blame this on mental illness, it really makes me sick to my stomach and outraged at the same time. Did the media ever hear of the term pure evil, or is that over their heads? This has been going on since Columbine in Colorado. wake up. Media, quit blaming evil on mental illness. I have suffered from mental illness for a good part of my life and endured the living hell that mental illness inflicts on its victims. I have never killed anybody, and mental illness is a daily reality of my life. I repeat, do not portray these evil murderers as victims of mental illness. These people have a soul sickness. That was the letter I received. I just want to say, wow, first of all. It's an amazing letter. I'm going to go right back to the first page. The thing that struck me, a lot of things struck me in this letter, and that's why I wanted to talk about it with you guys today. Bring it up. I'm not going to make too much light of it and not throw out, here's where you're at, because you know where you're listening to this. When it's said in here, eventually I started using harder drugs and hanging out with the wrong crowd, because seriously, it was blamed on being a teenager. That to me, I mean, parents out there, just make sure what your kids are doing, and try to help them and be there for them. And if you see someone who's in need of any help, and a teenager, don't be afraid to say, "Hey, what's going on?" It's a very difficult situation. In Borden Lodge, by the way, for people who are not in Duluth, Minnesota, or any other place in Minnesota, and don't have Borden Lodges or don't know what they are. Some people listening don't know exactly what we're talking about in that point. A Borden Lodge is just it's a place where you can go and live. It's kind of like a group home almost setting, except you can come and go as you please for the most part. And there are certain rules there, but they still make sure you get your medications, make sure you're fed, and all that other good stuff. Went to treatment 3 separate times for chemical dependency. That just blows my mind too. I mean, people who go to treatment and try, bless them for sure. For trying and giving it all they got. The boyfriend who sobered her up and got her going to AA, give him lots of credit. Lots of credit. Now, the part where meds have been switched more times than I can count, working in a group home setting before, I can completely understand that. I have seen that in my own eyes in every setting that I've seen where meds get switched around. Maybe we need to up this, down this, left this, right this. It's just madness. And the medical companies, they just make a killing out of it. And speaking of killing, the most important part of this second page, and the one I fully agree with, mental illness is not to blame for Vegas or New York or any of these shootings. Pure evil is. And that's plain and simple. These people, if they were in the right mindset or not, it doesn't matter. They took a gun and they didn't use common sense. Well, first of all, they got a gun, which they shouldn't have got a gun. But we'll get on that gun discussion later. This is about different. Media, quit blaming evil on mental illness. That is probably the most enduring part to this whole thing. And I really wish that the media would. I wish that they would stop talking about the shooter as much. I don't even like when they talk about the shooter, let alone what drove the person to do that. That's why we watch 48 Hours or whatever, and you can watch that and have a blast. But I don't want to hear about I want to hear a little bit maybe about the victims about their families or what the community is doing for the families of the victims. I don't want to hear about, the shooters. I did make a point on one of the wake up calls to say that I will never comment on and never bring up the name of the shooter in any of these because to me they are pure evil and they are losers and they are not worth my time. So that's one thing. But if they're mentally ill or not, it doesn't matter. Because mental illness is not pure evil. There is a difference, a huge difference. In fact, they're not even in the remote ballpark of being the same thing. And the worst part to think about this, folks, is everyone dealing with mental illness at this point says the same thing here. It's a daily reality in my life. And in the beginning part, she went on and said all the different ways that there is mental illness. It's amazing to think of what we do here in the United States and really all over the world, but definitely, in the United States, we look at it as something completely off kilter. But we can do better. We do have ways to do better. You need to talk to the media, probably. You need to talk to the governmental officials on what to do and how to take care of people with mental illness. And I think we're not doing enough. So I would appreciate any comments. I would appreciate them comments to be, if they disagree, if you want to disagree with us here on the Scott Show, that is fine. I'm totally open to disagreement. You don't have to dislike the podcast. You don't have to click the down button. You can click the up button because I would challenge somebody to disagree. If you disagree, make a comment. Still like the podcast because you like hearing my very wonderful voice. But comment. Tell me what you think. I know that the writer is listening. I know that the writer will read the comments. It is going on YouTube and Speaker.com both. So I would appreciate you guys commenting, telling me what you think, telling the writer what you think, and maybe we'll come back to this and make a part 2 about mental illness. I have a lot of part 2s that I need to do, but I want lots of comments first. So like, share, subscribe to the Scott Show. We're here. We're always talking about really cool things, really not so cool things sometimes, but hey, we do it either way. And if you guys want to hear a little bit more fun show than this, we do have the Wake Up Call every morning, 8 o'clock a.m. We also have other great podcasts. We have 10 channels. This one hits close to home, though, folks, and this is why it's so important to be talking about mental illness and everything that goes with it. So check us out, comment, like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends, make this go viral, and let's do something about this, folks. You can only do so much in this world by yourself, but let's get together, do this thing, and take care of these people and find solutions, and stop blaming people who. You stop blaming the illness, and just remember that it's a soul sickness. I love that statement. That's probably one of my favorite in the whole thing. A soul sickness. All right, and for the writer, who, by the way, thank you, writer, Miss Writer. for bringing this to my attention, sending this into the Scott Show. I want to thank all the listeners, and yes, please comment and let us know what you think. You guys have a great rest of your day.